time once again to slip into your camo, grab your bow, and join us out in the field for another episode of the Up North Journal, presented by PSE Archery. The Up North Journal crew is knocked and ready to rock for another exciting adventure. So let's step outside and hit the trail.
This episode of the Up North Journal podcast is brought to you by PSE Archery,
Spot Shooters Archery,
Easy Cut,
Packer Max,
Hunter's Blend Coffee,
Scent Lock,
Scent Blocker,
Lim Walker Game Calls,
Buck Baits,
Gut Check,
Stanislavski Release Aids,
Copper John,
Fourth Arrow Camera Arms,
Wind Sense Vapor Hunting Products,
and Rebel 6 Rubs. And don't forget, you can catch us in syndication at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on goodtalkradio.com. Welcome back to another episode of the Up North Journal, everybody. I'm host Mike Adams, sitting in a cabin on a Wednesday.
A Wednesday night.
With Dan DeFall.
Absolutely. Totally not traditional.
Not normal.
No, not normal at all. You know, it's one of those things. We got to do what we need to do to get information out to our listeners.
Absolutely. And before we get started, though, we've got to get a couple things out of the way.
Absolutely. We got to make sure, because we're drinking it on a Wednesday night, to make sure everybody gets over to Hunter's Blend Coffee, to huntersblendcoffee.com. Make sure you use the promo code
UNJ. You can see it right here on the screen.
Capital UNJ. You'll get 10% off your online order when you check out. From there, you can go over to Buck's Baits. If you want 20% off your order, you can use the promo code UpNorthJournal when you check out, and you'll get 20% off at Buck's Baits. And if you go over to rebel6.com and use North Journal, you'll get 20% off of your checkout there as well.
So the people are helping us or helping you.
And
the newest one,
we just talked to them last Sunday, using the promo code UpNorthJournal. You go to jpooutdoors.com, and you will get 10% off your call order when you check out up until
November 15th.
November 15th.
They got some really nice calls over there, too. Yep, a lot of good game calls. But now that we got that out of the way, now it's time to have some fun.
That's right. Let's have some fun on a Wednesday night.
So the reason we're here on a Wednesday, none other than we've got the Congressional Sportsmen Caucus on board. All the way from Washington, D.C., we have got Andy Treharne. Is it Treharne? Treharne.
Yeah, Treharne is what my parents say.
Okay, that's what your parents... Well, then we're going to go with what they say.
We'll go with that.
And we also have Ellary Tucker Williams with us. And we've got you guys on tonight because the Congressional Sportsmen Caucus, I've been actually following them, getting emails from them for a while. And Ellary, you were introduced to me by your brother, Rory, out in Washington. So we said, hey, let's get these guys on, find out what the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation and Caucus do.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, not a problem. Good to have you guys on tonight. So you're actually in Washington, D.C. You're not on Capitol Hill, are you?
We are.
You are on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, we're about 3 blocks away from the U.S. Capitol as we speak.
Well, there's a lot going on there right now. Let's not get into that, though.
Right? There is a lot going on. You know what?
Cheers here.
You know, it's glad to have you on the show and find out more about what you guys are up to up in Washington, helping out the sportsmen and fishermen out there. Ellary, since we made contact with you first, what do you do? And then I'll go to Andy.
Sure. So basically within the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, I am the state level coordinator for the Intermountain region of the United States. So I am basically the point person, I guess, for state level policy, working with industries, governor's offices, our caucus members to advance and work on policy pertaining to hunting, fishing, trapping, and recreational shooting. So I do that specifically within the states of Idaho, Montana, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico.
Okay, so you have a region, kind of like a region that you handle.
Exactly.
Okay, and now I'm assuming because we've got all the states that it's broken up into different regions, and you've got different coordinators for other states.
Precisely.
Okay, and Andy, what do you do for them?
I'm CSF's federal policy director, and I also manage our western region. So Ellary and I work together. She does a lot of the on-the-ground stuff in the states she mentioned. We've also got another coordinator that handles a number of other western states, and I still do the caucus work in Colorado and Wyoming.
Okay, so you guys are working on a state level, and as well as I guess the federal level. You work with the states, get their input, and then you work on federal policy. I mean, in a nutshell, is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we have we're set up with 3 caucuses that are made up of state legislators that are in something called the National Assembly of Sportsmen's Caucuses. So how that works is they'll get together in their state house with other legislators that are either passionate about the outdoors or want to learn more, and they'll form a caucus. We try to get them to do that in a bipartisan fashion, so Republicans and Democrats. And they get together, and we do a lot of educational programming to make sure they understand how our conservation system works in this country and know how much hunters and anglers put into that. And we also have a governor's sportsman's caucus, so the governors that want to be supportive of hunting and fishing, recreational shooting, trapping. And then we have a congressional caucus here in Washington that's about 300 members of Congress, and it was the first one that was started. And then here at CSF, we're the nonprofit that supports all 3 of those programs.
Okay.
And I got to ask you, how important is it when you're starting off getting these all put together and getting these political people on board, whether they're Democrat or Republican? How important is it to educate them and level set them as to how important this is to hunters and fishermen?
Oh, it's extremely important. That's a big part of what we do. We'll have really passionate people that are involved, elected officials, and they may be really, really into hunting and fishing, but that doesn't necessarily mean they know how conservation works or the role of the state fish and wildlife agencies or the role of the federal government. They might not know about things like the Pittman, Robertson, and Dingell-Johnson excise taxes that sportsmen pay into that go back to conservation. There's a lot that they're busy people, and a lot of them have day jobs, and especially at the state level are part-time legislators. So we have a lot on our plate in terms of education and connecting them with hunters and anglers and the outdoor industry and talking about economic benefits of what we all love to do. So yeah, there's a handful that get it and have a real strong baseline knowledge, but more often than not, we're there to help educate them and connect them with people that can explain things in detail. If we can't do it, we lean on our partners a lot for that. But yeah, there's a lot of education that needs to take place.
Are you both surprised at the amount of lack of knowledge that there are at that level when they're first introduced, that you start realizing this? Are you surprised at that? Is there a lot?
I guess I come from a more science background, so I'm kind of new to this policy scene, so I'm doing a lot of learning also. But from just a science background, I'm surprised, I guess, at how many people don't necessarily understand exactly how conservation works and how it's funded. And so I definitely see that also exists within like the policy realm. So I am surprised, but it's also not at the same time, because it seems to be a kind of common theme throughout. Everyone loves their natural resources, everyone loves their wildlife, and everyone wants to take care of them, want them to be there for the future and for future generations. But it's pretty often that individuals don't necessarily know what's being done now and how that can actually occur into the future.
Well, here in Michigan, even we got a lot of sportsmen that really don't understand it as well. How much money they contribute, or how it gets to the federal level, or how it comes back down to the state level. And I think that's important. I mean, one reason we got you on tonight is to explain some of this. Yeah,
it's critically important, and that's one of the things that we try to do through policy. And actually, you guys there in Michigan have a relatively new initiative with the Wildlife Council, where I think there's $1 surcharge on hunting and fishing licenses that goes into a pot of money that the state, with the input of mostly hunters and anglers, uses to spread the word to the people that don't hunt and fish about how important it is and how conservation works. And that was replicated off a program that started in Colorado in the 90s that was started after some of the animal rights folks and anti-hunting folks went to the ballot, and we lost the spring bear hunt through a ballot initiative, and we also lost a lot of trapping in '96 through a constitutional amendment. So sportsmen kind of got together and said, you know what, we're not doing a great job of educating ourselves, but even more importantly, we're not doing a great job of educating voters and the people that really ultimately will control our fate and our ability to do what we want to do. So we work on programs like that. We work on some school-based programs to try and get conservation education that's at a bare minimum fair to hunters and anglers and what they do for conservation into the schools. And it's a tall task. We got to do more of it.
You know, and that's I guess in Michigan that kind of goes back to the dove thing,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Well, and the wolf.
That's a whole nother thing.
And you spoke about that dollar. I didn't even know that was happening here in Michigan. I didn't know that extra surcharge was on our license. I had no clue. Did you know, Danny?
Not off the top of my head.
So, but getting back to something you just said, you're talking about the schools, working with the schools and getting conservation in the schools. I talked with somebody from SCI here recently, and they've got a big push of getting things into the schools through their local chapters. Do you guys do any work with them at all, or work hand in hand, or any other organizations to make this happen?
Oh, yeah. We work with SCI closely and have for many years. They were one of the first supporters and sponsors of our National Assembly of Sportsmen's Caucuses program. We work with their federal policy staff here in D.C. a lot. And they also have a couple state policy folks, and then their chapter volunteers and state chapter presidents and things like that are often involved at our state policy level, and we try to incorporate them into things like the advisory councils that are made up of sportsmen and women, and some of the conservation groups that we work with that we bring in to provide guidance to the state caucuses and give them good information and tell them what's going on out in the field and on the ground and on the water. So yeah, we've got a lot of partnerships. We've got formal partnerships with Ducks Unlimited, Pheasants Forever, and Quail Forever, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Mule Deer Foundation, National Wild Turkey Federation. So yeah, we're working with a lot of those habitat and advocacy groups hand in hand.
You guys are working with all the major players, it sounds like. And as we come up on our first break, where can people go for more information about what you guys do? Website, Facebook, where can they go?
Yeah, all of the above. We've got a website, which is probably the best place to start, and you can access all the social media channels there. And that's congressionalsportsmen.org. And it's at the end of the URL there, it's MEN, not MAN. So congressionalsportsmen.org.
So there you go, folks. If you guys hang on, we're going to step out for a break, and we'll be right back for our next segment.
PSE Archery has reinvented the way you buy bows.
From now on, you can make the most educated decision possible
by basing your bow choice specifically on your shooting needs and goals.
All you need to do is ask yourself, what kind of shooter am I? What do I want to achieve?
PSE will help find the right category for you.
So, what kind of shooter are you?
Find out at psearchery.com.
Welcome back. Second segment of
second segment of a Wednesday show.
Of our special Wednesday show.
Wednesday edition.
We're talking with Andy and Ellary out in Washington, D.C. from the Congressional Sportsmen Foundation.
Exactly. And it's good to have them on here so we can get the word out about what they're doing, because people are trying to do stuff.
Well, I tell you what, we got some things that we want answered, or got questions about some pretty big topics that are happening in the outdoors right now. So, Dan, you got one.
I got one for you. It just came up that I saw that out in California they banned commercial fur trapping. What are you guys doing about that for the sportsmen out there that's going, what the heebie-jeebies is going on?
It's a family show, keep it
going.
going.
I know, I'm trying.
We're doing what we can. California it's a tough place politically, and that state has become so urbanized that even though they still have a lot of hunters and anglers that live in rural areas and people that leave town to go hunt, just the numbers when we try and go work on a bill like that in a committee are pretty daunting. And we do have a sportsman's caucus that we work with in the California legislature, and we've had some tremendous advocates that got up and spoke on a number of bad bills and made the points that need to be made. But unfortunately, the political environment in that state is so challenging right now.
It's an uphill climb, isn't it?
It really is.
You're being too nice. You're being way too nice.
Family show.
That gets back to the educating the public thing that we were talking about earlier. We've got to figure out some way to make the people that don't have any fundamental understanding of wildlife management understand that there is value in it. And things like trapping aren't always the easiest to start with, but we've got to start somewhere, and we'll just keep losing more and more stuff and things to do unless we figure this out. And California in particular, they've got problems with invasive species that trappers can help with. And they need incentives to help with, quite frankly, to make it worth their time. There's a tremendous scientific basis for trapping, and there are biologists out there that are keeping track of wildlife, and they're not going out of their way to allow people to take more than can be sustained on a long-term basis. But the understanding of that when people really just have no baseline knowledge of how wildlife management works and human-wildlife conflict and how all of that fits together, we've got a real problem on our hands in a state like that.
That's kind of what I was also going to touch on, was just the increased incidences of human-wildlife conflict. When you kind of reduce the ability of the state to be able to manage these populations in an effective manner, you're going to have increased human-wildlife conflicts, and that's just not really something that people think about, but that impacts us all. So
they think about it when it's in the news, and it's usually bad news.
Yeah, when they've got a mountain lion that's eating their pets and chasing people. Yeah, and all of a sudden it's news.
Yeah, and that's the case in California. They haven't allowed mountain lion harvests in a long time, and they still kill a lot of cats. But instead of people paying back into conservation to do it when they buy a license, they're having to hire people to do it.
They're spending money to do it.
And they bring all of the cats in and get them necrop seed, and about 60% of them have household pets in their digestive tract. So they're not really solving any problems. They're just making themselves feel better about how the wildlife is being
used. What? I think you said it perfectly. Making them feel better.
Better, yeah. It's about a feeling. It's not emotion.
Right.
It's 100% emotion. And, when you really break it down, and we're talking about a legislature regulating method of take, so how people harvest wildlife, at a fundamental level, no matter what that is, we don't support that. We want State Fish and Wildlife Agency biologists or commissions that are informed by those biologists' recommendations making decisions. And I know you guys have seen that in the Michigan legislature, where the legislature is trying to legislate wildlife management, and we typically don't win as sportsmen and women when that happens.
Well, we're dealing with something very similar right now. We have a baiting ban for whitetail. Any recreational feeding, and actually it's going as far now, I believe, as any recreational feeding for like bird feeders, because the deer get into those as well. But there was a big push here in Michigan on the legislative side for them to get involved and repeal that. And I'm like, no, we fought for years to get Proposal G, which uses sound science for our state wildlife agencies to make good choices on how to regulate the hunting seasons and our resources. And we do not want to go back to just like what you said, because then we wind up with people like down in Ann Arbor where they want to
spend $225,000 on
neutering
deer.
Yeah. Instead of letting people come in and buy special hunting license, maybe for archery, and take some of those animals.
And that's one of the ones that I knew about was California. But Ellary, you're kind of out west from Michigan. On the state level, are you seeing anything starting to bubble up from what you're seeing as a potential red flag? Hey guys, something's coming down the pipe. Here it is.
Well, I have only been with CSF for a couple of months, so I'm still kind of figuring out exactly what all of that is. But I mean, there is definitely a trend kind of throughout the country, but specifically a lot in the Western region as far as these animal rights groups that are coming in and really trying to take away the state's ability to manage some of these more charismatic megafauna species. And again, as you said, acting more on emotion than sound science. So that's just something that we have to be consciously aware of and keeping track of, because lots of times, they come in hard and fast and you have to kind of respond in a similar manner. So we have to keep an eye out on that.
Yeah, and they're well funded too. That's
Very
the
well funded.
The other challenge. And I've seen in the West over the last probably 2 years, a lot of the traditional kind of big anti-hunting groups like Humane Society of the United States and some of their friends or kind of connected groups. They've really, especially in the West, been going after predator harvest, and whether it's the coyote contests or bobcats, mountain lions. I think they consider those low-hanging fruit, and some of the human dimensions research that we look at, it starts out and they do a telephone survey of 1,000 people or something, and they ask the people, hey, do you support hunting in general? And most people, about 80% of them, will say yes. And then they start going down the line of, hey, do you support archery hunting? Do you support predator hunting? And the public approval, when they're asked those questions, just gets lower and lower as they tick off those questions. And I think the animal rights folks have truly keyed in on that, and they're going after the low-hanging fruit from their perspective.
It's funny how you say that, because I can see, if you guys were to do a poll, if I was to do a poll and Mike do a poll, I bet you we could get it to sway how I wanted it to say, you and Mike. And it's kind of, and you start with the low-hanging fruit. You pick them off one by one, and before you know it, you're starting to climb up the tree.
Well, it's like I say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yeah, and there's they've also got a multiple approach to this too, where Colorado, we had a citizen petition to ban bobcat harvest that was put in front of the Parks and Wildlife Commission this summer, and it was roundly rejected. Unanimously rejected. And so the first thing that the proponents of that petition did was go onto Facebook and write a rant and say they're exploring options at the legislature and going to the ballot. And we've got there's an initiative that's collecting signatures in that state right now to do forced reintroduction of wolves. And so they're going at it from multiple angles, and unfortunately they've got a lot of resources at their disposal.
But it isn't all doom and gloom, because Arizona was pretty successful in stopping a ballot initiative that was to ban a coyote contest, I believe, and bobcat.
Mountain lion.
They did squash that.
Yep. They were able. So it's not all doom and gloom, but it's a constant fight.
Well, and going back to kind of like what we said with Proposal G, that's the reason we had that put into place, so the legislature couldn't legislate how our resources are managed by our DNR. So,
and like you said, Ellary, it's not all doom and gloom, but you gotta keep looking around every corner, because before you know it, they'll sneak up on you, and you lose all your Halloween candy because they take it.
Right.
Yeah,
stay vigilant. Well, and actually another thing that we do is with things like Initiative G, the Scientific Wildlife Management Act, a big part of our state program is information sharing. And so if we have this stuff pop up in one state, like I've used that language to show to folks in Colorado when they ask, hey, what can we be thinking about to fight these things? And the first one I pull up is Michigan's initiative, and it says that management of the resource is under the jurisdiction of the commission. And I said, this is going to be a heavy lift, but if you're serious about this, let's keep talking.
I just shared that information with Montana too. So.
Well, the biggest problem we've got right now with our commission is they're appointed by the governor. So depending on which side of the fence him or her is on and what they want to see happen, they can appoint the people to make those rules. And that's another fight that we're having right now. So we've got one part of the fight taken care of. Now we just got to make that next step and get people who have a vested interest in maintaining our hunting heritage here and fishing heritage here in Michigan to make sure that stays in place.
Amen to that.
So,
and that's another thing. As we talk about this stuff, I think, Mike, you got one that's on your mind, too.
It's more on a worldwide level. It's a federal bill. It's a House bill. I think it's 2445. They call it the Cecil Act, about bringing game in from abroad. Where do you guys stand on that right now? What's going on with that?
We're working on that one to oppose it as much as we can. This is a lot of stuff that's driven by emotion, and there's a segment of the population that, quite honestly, I don't think is all that big, but they're extremely loud. And unfortunately, there are some members of Congress that feel like they need to respond to what those folks are saying. And you have an incident like the Cecil deal a couple years ago that was high profile, got a lot of media coverage. And again, I think when that happens, some of the folks that don't like what we enjoy doing and don't see value in it, they see that as low-hanging fruit. And so they go find some friends in Congress and get some really bad policy ideas introduced into a bill. Fortunately, I don't think that one is going to pass in this Congress, but we're still not taking any chances.
Right, exactly.
Working against that.
Like we talked about. If you don't watch it, something will happen. And like you said, it's almost like it's one of those you can't believe it, but to some, they get the right ear.
Yeah,
it'll take off.
Right.
Yeah. If somebody's decided that they just emotionally can't see any value in hunting or harvesting wildlife, they're most of the time a lost cause, unless you can get them out in the field or something and really show them what it's all about. And They unfortunately they have some power to work on the Hill here in D.C. and advance some really, really bad ideas.
Right, exactly. And getting these people exposed, they might be the traditional non-hunter, but here in Michigan, Tristan Cole, the representative.
Yeah, he's from our Sportsmen's Caucus.
That's what he does a lot, is he'll try to find members that he works with that aren't the hunting type, and he'll take them and go do something outdoor related to kind of, if you want to say, baptize them into, hey, this is how it works, and show them. It's that same thing that you were talking about in the first segment about education. He's doing the same thing.
He took 5 or 6 people from southeastern Michigan down in Wayne County, Detroit, and he got them out and took them out. And I forget what type of hunting they did, but they had a blast. So it's introducing them to it, and that's one way of making an impact.
We do a lot of that through the state caucuses, and they're all a little bit different, but a lot of them don't have any sort of a membership requirement. And the reason they do that is so that they can invite policymakers that might not have a whole lot of experience in the outdoors to come and learn. And we do everything from educational programming for those caucuses, where we invite speakers in to talk about a certain topic, or even going out to a shooting range or organizing a hunt or a fishing trip. And we try to get those people out there to see it and experience it and know that it's a family-friendly, safe activity that has a lot of value for other things that they might care about.
Exactly. And you know what? We're going to be bumping up on our first break, but when we come back, how about we talk about the clay pigeon shoot that you guys were part of? And before we go to break, can you tell us where we can go to find out more about you guys?
Yeah, again, it's congressionalsportsmen.org. And we've got a lot of different stuff on the website, from one-page issue briefs on policy topics. You can sign up. We have a legislative tracking service called Tracking the Capitals, where you can just enter your email and click a few boxes about what you're interested in, and you'll get automatically generated emails that talk about bills that are moving in your state legislature or Congress, and so you can keep track of that stuff. We've got a lot of our partners listed on the website, so it's a good resource.
All right, awesome. So what we'll do is we'll step out, and we'll come back after the break.
All right, we'll be right back after this.
PSE Archery has always dominated the speed category. Now, the most revolutionary cam system ever to hit the market has perfected the shooting experience. Introducing PSE's Evolve Cam System, featuring extremely high let-off capabilities and the smoothest draw cycle in history. No other cam system has ever delivered this level of total comfort and total control. Experience PSE. Experience performance.
Welcome back. Third segment of our special Wednesday evening show.
Wednesday show. We're learning a lot about our government. And you know what? And it's also good to hear what they're doing about topics that we hear about in the news, and behind the scenes they're on it or going after it.
Right.
Or, and if you heard the second segment of the show, you know what we were talking about. And it's just amazing. Some of the fact sheets we're about to show, the amount of money that sportsmen spend. And
before we get to that, speaking of money, how is your group funded?
A lot of our funding is from generous donations from the outdoor industry. A lot of it is some of the partner NGOs we went through earlier.
Okay.
See value in our work and those partnerships, so they support us. But everything from Bass Pro and Cabela's and their Roundup program, to federal ammunition, all the way down to some real small mom-and-pop operations that somehow got connected with us and liked what they heard and thought we deserved support.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. It's basically funded by us outdoorsmen.
Absolutely.
Directly or indirectly.
And, and it's a simple, when you're in that store, you're cashing out, they always ask you, do you want to round up?
Mm-hmm.
What's 15 cents?
Right.
Yeah, it's a great program. Their support is absolutely instrumental to what we do and our ability to do it.
But other things you do is you go out and you go have a shoot, and you go out and we're showing a picture of the shoot. Is
the 2019 Clays Competition.
Oh, great! Yeah. So those events are kind of getting back to what we talked about during the last segment, where we're doing what we can to get elected officials and their staff members out and experience some of these things. And so we do a shoot for members of Congress every spring, and we get a bunch of them out there, some of them real experience, and they're breaking 90% of the clays that are thrown, and others that have never even held a gun before. And so we've got folks out there to teach them some range safety and firearm safety. And then we do another one in August when Congress is in recess for staff. And that's a good time to do it because that's a little bit of a slower time during the legislative session. And we can get them out there, and same thing. There's some real experienced staff members on Capitol Hill that know how to shoot and perform really well. And then there are some others that just want to see what it's all about. And we like it because it gives us an opportunity to, one, get to know them, but two, we can go out there and do things like, when we're going around shooting with them, talk about how every time they pull the trigger and a shell's ejected from their shotgun, that's about another nickel for conservation through the Pittman Robertson excise tax. And they might not have known that, so it's a good opportunity to actually show them how this works.
And also help take away some of their apprehension, too, that they may have coming into it. So.
Right, exactly, and it's kind of funny the way you just mentioned it, that they probably they might not have had any idea, but what they just did just helped, and they probably didn't even know that. That's awesome.
No, a lot of them had no idea.
Well, you mentioned Pittman Robertson. We got a fact sheet up here that you sent us $797 million last year alone was generated by the Pittman Robertson Fund from hunting and recreational shooting related excise taxes. Talk a little bit about some of the things that we buy in the stores that generates that money.
So on the hunting and recreational shooting side, under the Pittman Robertson Act, there's either a 10 or 11% excise tax. It's actually collected at the wholesale level, but it is on firearms, ammunition, archery equipment, so bows, arrows, and that goes to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service quarterly, and then the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a formula that they use that's part of the law that allocates that money back out to the state fish and wildlife agencies to support their programming, and there's a hunter education component of that programming, so we can teach people how to be safe in the field. There's a lot of scientific research on wildlife that's funded through that program, and there's state wildlife areas, WMAs. Those are purchased and sometimes maintained with that funding. They pay for a lot of their research staff. So it's a big component of what we call the American System of Conservation funding. And maybe the best part about it is when states sign up for that funding, they have to pass a law through their legislature that's called an assent language. Mm-hmm. And it basically says that if we're accepting this money that's collected by the federal government for wildlife, that we cannot use any of our hunting and fishing license money that we collect for anything other than wildlife management, conservation, hunter education, things that fall under the authority of the agency like Michigan DNR or Colorado Parks and Wildlife or Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife.
And that drives the states insane when they want that money.
And they can't touch
it. Can't touch it.
You're exactly right. And, whoever came up with that idea back in the late 30s, they got something right, because it truly does protect the sportsman's investment in conservation.
Well, we'll throw us back up here, but $632 million by Dingle Johnson Wallop Bro Fund, fishing and boating related excise taxes. That comes from the fishing side.
It does.
Talk a little bit about what you buy at this it's involved there.
Yeah, so that one is
lures.
Yep. Lures, rods, reels. I think creels are included in that, and then in the 80s they added on a motorboat fuel excise tax called Wallop Bro.
Okay.
And that goes back and is allocated out in a similar fashion, but there was some need for boating safety education, and there's some common interests there with things like boat ramps that recreational boaters were using prior to that time that had been funded by Dingle Johnson, so basically funded by anglers, but didn't really have an opportunity to put money into the system. And so there was a little bit of a parity issue there, and also some common interest. And so I think the industry recognized that, and they said, you know what, we're going to take it upon ourselves to tax ourselves, and we're going to make sure that money goes back into recreational access and conservation.
How often do you guys have to sit and fight with people on the Hill trying to get that money?
It's usually in the state legislatures where that happens, and it pops up every once in a while. It's not every year, but there's some really bad proposals that'll come out in something like a governor's budget that is presented to the legislature. So it's not law yet, but it's a recommendation, and we'll have to get everybody together and go in and talk to the governor's budget staff and say, hey, if you go down this road and you don't move off of this, you're jeopardizing millions of dollars for your state's Fish and Wildlife Agency. And they usually, there's only a handful of cases where the legislature has actually gone ahead and done it, and then they have to pay back money with interest, and so they usually don't do that the following year.
Yeah, that's real cost effective.
You know what? My guess is that's like a reciprocal. So every few years, we got a new people in.
You got to remind them.
Yep.
Smack them on the hand a little bit.
Repeat every couple years.
You got things like term limits, which philosophically, I can definitely appreciate the concept, but when you have those things and somebody can only be in a legislature for 10 years or something, you just about the time they start figuring out what's going on, it's time for them to go.
Yep.
We got somebody new in there and got to start all over.
Start the retraining process.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, we're just looking at the numbers. These two things alone. Last year, hunters from hunting license, 872 million, 724 million from fishing license. I got to say that we say it all the time, but people really don't understand. Like I work in the media, I work at a television station, and I always try to talk about how much money we give back to the resources and how much we contribute, and people really they don't understand. And I think these are important things to get out to people.
Well, and that's only one part of the equation too. You have the habitat groups, like the Pheasants Forever and the Ducks Unlimiteds and the Elk Foundations and Whitetails Unlimited. All of these groups that are raising money that's not captured in those documents that you've got on the screen are raising a tremendous amount of money for conservation, and a lot of that is driven by hunters and anglers that just support the mission and want to give something back. So
right.
It's even bigger when you consider those fundraising efforts, using that money to leverage other existing government programs, make their impact bigger, and quite frankly, the volunteer time that members of those groups are putting into their events or doing stewardship work out in the field. It really is. When you add all of it together, it's pretty substantial.
And then when you look at it state by state, the Michigan alone in 2018, millions of dollars from the licenses of hunters and fishermen there. It's almost mind-boggling.
37 million for hunting license, 28 million for fishing license. Pittman Robertson, 24 million. Dingle Johnson, 10. I mean, we got over $100 million kicked in 2018 into the state of Michigan by Sportsmen. So, and I'm quite proud too because it shows the national rankings. Hunting license were 4th, 7th in fishing license, which I thought would be a little higher, but with the Great Lakes. But Pittman Robertson were 5th and 7th, Dingle Johnson, and 4th overall for the total. So, Michigan is really rich in resources and wildlife, and we care about it, and our guys are stepping up and making it known that this is what we want protected. So
well, and the track record's pretty good, right?
Right, exactly. Okay, so we're number 4.
Overall.
Do you know? Okay, what was the number 1? Do you know?
It might be Florida or Texas.
Okay,
it might be Texas.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Texas is go big or go home, right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm sure they wouldn't be shy about letting you know either.
Right. I hear that. I tell you what, why don't we go ahead and take our last break? We want to get into a little more of the personal side.
Oh, yeah, we need to get into the personal side.
Have a little bit of fun. We've talked a lot of numbers. We talked about politics and policy, but we don't want it all to be about that. We want to learn a little bit about you guys as well. So we're going to step outside, take our last break. We come back. We will find out more about Andy and Ellary. We'll be right back after this.
Acceleration is part of PSE's DNA. PSE pioneered the speed movement. Now they've developed the vapor category to help you find the most powerful bows on the market to fit you.
High speed equates to intense power and building the momentum you need to be successful. Are you a vapor shooter? Find out at psearchery.com.
Welcome back. Last segment of the show, special Wednesday edition of the Up North Journal.
It wouldn't be our interview model not to get and dive into their personal life.
Just a little bit. Well, they sent us some pictures. They're not
just
sitting on Capitol Hill. They get outside and do things.
We got pictures and we got questions.
Okay. So who are we going to start with? Who wants to go first?
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay. All right. Yeah, you're the one that started all this, so might as well put you right up here front and center. I did meet you through your brother. He introduced us, and I'm gonna start with the family photo here. You guys at what's called duck camp. It looks like you're in the middle of the woods, though.
We are.
Okay, all right. Explain a little.
We're, I guess, a little bit different in where we duck hunt. We duck hunt and have property in the north central part of Washington State. There's a lot of lakes that we go to and hunt at, so it's definitely not what you think of as far as duck hunting from Washington State. It's a little bit more fast-paced because we kind of jump around from lake to lake, but it's a lot of fun, and for us, it's not only about getting out there and doing something that we love and going duck hunting, but also about the camaraderie and the family time and bringing everyone together and getting away from civilization in a sense and just kind of reconnecting. So yeah. I always joke, but it's not really a joke, that opening duck hunting weekend or whatever you want to call it is the second most well-attended family event of the year next to Christmas.
That's awesome.
There you go. Well, okay.
What I like, though, is you've got from young to old. You've got young kids all the way. It looks like you've got, what, 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 generations there? 3?
3. Yep, 3.
Okay.
There you go. And that leads us into the next picture, which leads me into our first question for you.
Perfect.
Okay, so you're at duck camp, but this could be anything you wanted. What would be your favorite go-to wild game meal that you got to have it? This is what we're going to make. What would it be?
Oh, man. Go-to wild game meal. I mean, it's kind of a classic, I guess, but it just probably have to be, venison tenderloin with some garlic mashed potatoes and some asparagus. I think would just have to be some classic good ones you can't really go wrong with.
Which leads us to the picture of you with a doe.
Oh, perfect.
when you got, was that your first one?
Yes, it was.
Congratulations. And was that gun or bow?
That was gun. That was about, I think, 2 years ago. So I grew up primarily upland game bird hunting and duck hunting. My family, I guess my father was very much into big game hunting when he was younger, but when I came along, he'd slow down a little bit. So he was not quite so into packing big deer out. So we kind of focused more on the bird hunting. And my brother has gotten into it now. But I kind of got into it more recently and shot my first doe, I guess my first 2 does, and it was a wonderful experience. Very different from bird hunting, but nonetheless still a wonderful educational experience to be able to take an animal from, forest to freezer, doing the whole process myself. So that was pretty cool.
Field to fork.
Yep.
Nice.
And you didn't stop there. It looks like you went a little trout fishing here.
Yes, I've been doing lots of things recently. It's been quite fun.
That leads me into question number 2 for you. So you're traveling to this fishing spot. You're traveling to this hunting spot. You're doing a lot of traveling. Okay, you're in a vehicle. What kind of music are you listening to? Or are you listening to a podcast? What do you jamming to or listening to?
Oh, man. Honestly, it really depends on the setting. If I'm driving through some mountains, I'm probably going to listen to some Tyler Childers or something like that, some good country. And if I'm in a city, it might be a little bit more urban. I'm not, it depends on the setting and what I'm in the mood. Listen to just about everything.
Okay. So you're jamming along, country music. You look over, you got to have a favorite snack to have with you. What would be your go-to favorite snack?
Oh, she's laughed. She knows exactly what it is, right?
I do, but it's kind of silly, but it's goldfish, if I'm being honest.
Cheese, cheddar flavor, pizza flavor?
Just traditional. Can't go wrong with regular goldfish.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, the orange one.
All right, well, save the best for last. If you're going to tell us about a hunt, and we're around a campfire, and it could be a fishing trip, an outdoors experience, what is that story going to be, and why?
It's like a funny story.
You pick.
We're sitting around the fire, and it's your turn to tell us a story.
Sure. So I guess this isn't necessarily a story where I myself am doing these fishing, but since Rory, my brother, introduced us and got this show going, it kind of highlights his and my relationship and what we got into a lot when we were younger, and kind of led to our passion for the outdoors. But my brother's about 7 years older than me, and he's been fly fishing for a while, and we spent a lot of time up in BC and Southeast Alaska on our family boat during the summers. And whenever we'd come to a spot and anchor out. My brother and I would get in the dinghy and go exploring. And this one time I remember we took the dinghy up this river, I guess, and come to these little holes, and he's fishing and fly fishing. I'm young, so I'm just kind of hanging out, watching what he's doing. He's not catching anything, per usual, because usually I'm the one that catches the fish. But so he's just hitting this hole, next hole, next hole. We're getting further and further and further up this river, right? And before we left, Dad had told us, pay attention to the tide because, it's going to be going out and you might be left high and dry. Well, basically, little me was telling my brother that we needed to head back because the tide was going to be heading out and we were going to get stuck again because, yes, it had happened before. And he just kept saying, no, just this next hole just looks really good. I just need to hit this next one, just this next one. And it continued on until it started getting dark, and he realized, okay, we should probably head back. Dinner's probably ready, so it's about good time to head back. And sure enough, the tide had gone out, and we were stuck high and dry. Big boulders that we didn't know were there, and we had this big dinghy that we had to try and get back to water to get back to the boat. And so it basically ended up being him and I pulling and pushing this dinghy through rocks and boulders to get it back to where we could run it again to get back to the boat safely. So we got back, and Mom and Dad basically asked us, like, oh, did you get stuck? And yes, we did, but we made it, and it was fine. But it's a tale that tends to be repeated quite often in our family.
When I talk to him here,
I was gonna say we got to have him on the show to compare notes.
Well, he's doing an antelope hunt here soon, and I want to talk to him. So when we get him on, Rory, when you watch this, I want to know more about this because she's laying it all on you, buddy.
Right?
So. He is the older brother. He's supposed to be the responsible one.
That's right. He's supposed to be watching out for his little sister.
Right.
That's good.
All right, Andy, it's your turn now.
He's already got a few of the questions, though. He's been thinking.
He's been thinking. He's been like, oh, okay.
All right, lay it on me.
Go ahead, Dan.
All right. So we got a picture of you up that looks like
up in the mountains somewhere.
Up in the mountains. Let's start. You're obviously you're out in the mountains. You're walking. We're gonna phrase it a little bit differently. You got a backpack on there.
Archery. He's archery.
Oh, he's archery. Okay. All right. So you got to have a snack in that backpack. What's your go-to snack that's in that backpack?
Pepperoni sticks.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Got a little meat stick going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Nice.
Well, doesn't go bad.
Right?
Yeah, it never goes bad.
Well, when you're in stand, do you ever sneak your cell phone out with you and put an earbud in your ear while you're sitting on stand? You don't. Okay, I can't get you on that.
You can't go that route.
I'll admit.
But when he comes out of the mountains, he's got to travel. So he had a successful hunt, or maybe not, and he puts on some music. What are you going to be listening to?
Coming out, I'm probably going to go podcast.
Okay.
Up North Journal.
Oh, okay. That's 2 weeks in a row, and somebody said that.
No, I'm a big Ranella fan.
Right.
I like listening to that. And then we've actually got some colleagues that work for some partner conservation organizations and trade associations that do a podcast out of Wyoming called Your Mountain.
Okay.
And they're mostly policy guys.
Okay.
And so they're talking about hunting and fishing policy mixed in with hunting and fishing experiences, and given my line of work, it's a lot to relate to, and they do a pretty good job of talking about stuff.
That's awesome. That's good to know. Well, obviously, you do some fishing. We got one of you with looks like a trout in your hands. You're smiling away.
Yeah. I think that one is from the Shoshone River, just outside of Cody, Wyoming.
Okay.
And
okay. Leads you into question number 3. You're looking pretty hungry.
What's it going to be?
What's it going to be? Your favorite meal?
Oh, I'm going elk backstrap. No doubt about it.
Do you do them fresh off the elk right in the field?
I have before, but I usually end up taking them home. So I gotta
butter, garlic.
How I'm gonna prepare them?
Any special way? Butter, garlic, salt, pepper.
Butter, garlic. I'll pull a recipe out of the Boone and Crockett cookbook every once in a while, or try to do them over the open fire. I've got a smoker if I've got a a particularly fatty cut of something. So I try to mix it up.
Wrap it in bacon.
I've got a question I've never asked anybody.
Uh-oh.
And I'm going to ask you too, each of you at the same time. Seeing as how that you're in policy making, in conservation, who's your favorite conservationist and why?
Oh.
Pressure.
Mine's TR.
That was mine.
Okay.
He's got a quote that I think captures my approach to what we do pretty well, and it's something along the lines of do the best you can with what you've got where you are.
Right on.
That one really speaks to me, and I think he was a pragmatic person, and that said, also was pretty revolutionary in the way that he looked at conservation and things like incentives and management, and had a real long view of what conservation should and could look like in this country.
And his ability to collaborate too with people that had similar goals, but not necessarily agree on other areas. But his ability to bring people together for the common goals.
I've read that about him. That was something that really stuck in my mind about him. It was pretty powerful. But I got to see Shane Mahoney almost 2 years ago, and some of the things he said that night was profound, and it really made me think and step back and kind of reevaluate kind of where I was at. So, but yeah, that's cool. I mean, I just had to ask that, seeing how this is what you guys do. So I figured it would come from probably up there in Washington D.C., somebody from that realm. So
yeah, and I've got favorite conservationists that aren't famous conservationists too. I mean, some of the people that we get to work with, especially some of them that do it on a voluntary basis, show up to every commission meeting. They go down to the legislature, even if they live 3 hours away. And they're just present, and it's not because they're getting paid to do it. They're just passionate about the lifestyle and wildlife and conservation. And I like my good buddy Dan Gates, who runs the Trappers Association in Colorado. He's one of the best volunteers that I've ever been around, and he cares more about conservation than anybody I know. But he's just not a famous one.
Well, that speaks volume. You don't have to be famous to be good at something, and obviously, your passion brings it out in you.
Yeah, absolutely. And trappers are a hardy soul, and I think they're the most underappreciated people in the outdoors. For what they do it for the love of the sport. It's not for the amount of money, because there's no money involved in it. And it's long, it's hard, it's grueling. I trapped for a couple of years, and I tell you what, it takes a toll on you. So to do it and to do it right. So hats off to those guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now that I had a roll going with my questions, and you ruined it.
I know.
You just had to throw
Go
it
ahead,
in there.
ask him the last question.
Can I ask him the last question? Thank you. I tell you, I get no respect over in the co-chair here. All right, give me your favorite story. We're sitting around the fire, laughing because Ellary just threw her brother under a bus,
under a boulder,
boulder. And now
the river disappeared.
Right now, it's Andy's turn. What do you got?
Well, I assume this is a family-friendly show, and
yes,
I'm
it
at
is.
work, so I better tone it down a little bit. Let's see. Some of my favorite experiences are going up to fish Gray Reef or Miracle Mile on the North Platte in Wyoming, and we'll either rent a boat or one of my buddies will have one, and we'll take it up there and float. And it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, outside of Laramie or outside of Casper, excuse me. And there's this little bar that is connected to a little motel, and then there's a gas station and not a whole lot else around there, but the fishing's fantastic, and we like to camp on the river or get a motel room and then go back into the little bar after a long day of fishing, and we'll have a few pops in there, and there's some pretty funny stuff that's happened over the years. Like they'll be short staffed, and they'll just pull somebody out of the trailer park that's down the road and tell them to start waiting tables. And one time, you'll order something and they'll say, hold on, let me go check to see if we have that. But one time we were up there, and, it's a pretty salt-of-the-earth crowd out there in the middle of Wyoming, and I just happened to be up there at the same time as my buddy Matt, who had at the time been living over in Switzerland and working there. And he had two buddies from Switzerland, but they were one was from another European country and another one was from Israel, that wanted to see the West. And so he brought them out. They landed in Denver and they rented a big RV, and he took them up to Gray Reef in the RV, and we just happened to be up there at the same time. And man, seeing these European guys in there with a bunch of cowboys and fishing guides and oil and gas workers. I probably can't tell all the stories, but it was pretty funny.
I can just draw the picture.
I tell you what, you guys, the next day, your sides hurt from laughing so much.
Yeah.
I know exactly where that's going.
It was a cultural experience.
Exactly, because I've had relatives come over from Europe over here, and they look at you and go, OMG.
Right?
And you're like, but we're having fun.
Yeah. Oh, and they ended up having a great time. And I think the last time I was in there this spring, I went and found it on the ceiling. It's one of those bars where everybody pins a dollar bill up on the ceiling. And I went and found it, and there was still some Israeli money pinned to the ceiling. So
it's going to be there forever.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah, they'll be remembered at the Sunset Grill in Alcova, Wyoming.
That's good.
Forever. So
there you go. So anybody heading out there, stop at the Alcova Grill
and look for the Israeli money on the ceiling.
There you go.
Yeah, you guys should call them. Maybe they'll give you a promo code that you can pass along.
There you go. Yeah. I tell you what, we're running up on the end of the show, but it has been a great hour to have you guys on. And one more time, if anybody wants to go out and find more information about you guys, where do they need to go?
Yeah, that's congressionalsportsmen.org.
All right, there you go, folks. Before we sign off, people that are listening to the show right now or watching, what's the one thing that you would suggest people do to make a difference in helping spread the word, whether it's information about hunting and fishing the outdoors, about where the money comes from? What's the one thing you would suggest that somebody does?
Go ahead.
I think I would say to engage with people that they wouldn't necessarily normally engage with, to educate them. So whether that's, making friends or, introducing yourself to someone who's not necessarily a hunter, but, taking them in and taking them out, or, just kind of showing them what it's about and kind of taking away some of those negative stereotypes that they may have, and just kind of opening their eyes to exactly what the community and what everything is about. I think that's probably the most impactful thing that you can do as an individual, is to just spread your knowledge and spread your experience to individuals who otherwise may not have had those, and then try and bring them in to have their own experiences to build their opinions and perspectives off of.
Awesome. Don't anybody say, well, there's nothing I can do, because there is something you can do.
Engage and educate.
And thank you for what you guys do for us on Capitol Hill. And that goes for all of us out there, for the fights that you guys fight for us. Because if it wasn't for somebody being up there spreading the word, we'd just be a little lone voice in our own community trying to make a go of it. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you guys for having us, and we look forward to talking to you again. Really
all right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, if you got any information that's going on that's hot off the press and you want to get it out there, let us know, and we'll get you back on the show.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us tonight. We want to thank Ellary and Andy for joining us all the way from Washington, D.C. See, there's good people in D.C. They're not all bad. So keep fighting the fight for us, and we'll talk again real soon.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
That'll do it for us tonight, folks. And don't forget, you can catch us in syndication at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on goodtalkradio.com. This episode was brought to you by PSE Archery,
Spot Shooters Archery,
Easy Cut,
Packer Max,
Hunter's Blend Coffee,
Scent Lock,
Scent Blocker,
Lim Walker Game Calls,
Buck Baits,
Gut Check,
Stanislawski Release Aids,
Copper John,
Fourth Arrow Camera Arms,
Wind Sense Vapor Hunting Products,
and Rebel 6 Rubs.
Thanks for listening, and join us again here next week. Until then, remember, as we always like to say, if you're out on the water or in the woods, shoot straight and be safe. Until next week on the Up North Journal.